Hey everybody, welcome back to Dreamseed VR. I'm your host Sarah Finn, and today we're going to do a part 2 on brain-computer interfaces. So in our previous episode, we talked a little bit about the recent research into how this is even possible, how it's going to work, and what the implications might be. I figured it would be relevant to cover a couple different aspects of this topic in more depth and give a little bit more context as to why they're significant with brain-computer interfaces. And those topics include, security, encryption, education when it comes to neurocognitive sciences, as well as the nature of metadata and advertising, and the concept of ownership. So to begin with, let's talk about security and let's talk about encryption. So currently there is a race going on in terms of quantum encryption, and it has the potential to completely disrupt the crypto scene. That's a tangential subject, but it's still relevant here because computer brain interfaces would only be as secure as current security capacities, right? And rather than it just being your email or your bank account that's compromised, it would be your entire stream of consciousness that's compromised in this circumstance. So security is a really big deal when it comes to the emergence of these technologies. There's no doubt that in your life, you or someone you know has encountered that awkward situation where you have a conversation with a friend or a loved one that might be in person and you're just speaking with one another, or it might be in a text conversation, whether that's through your text or your instant messenger, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, something like that. And then maybe just a few hours later, maybe a day, maybe a week, you notice that you start to be advertised to for a product that you were having a private conversation about. Well, it turns out that a lot of the permissions that are given on apps that we use every day, whether that's Facebook Messenger or Instagram or even, YouTube, oftentimes the microphone will be on and the app has asked you permission at one point, whether or not it can record or have access to your camera roll. And for the sake of convenience, you've said yes. And that is oftentimes how people are inadvertently allowing corporations or companies to spy on them. Now, if you were to take that situation and extrapolate where that's going to go with brain-computer interfaces, it's a pretty freaky place. Not only does it have the potential to just be spying on your stream of consciousness, but say you go to use another app, you go to use another computer website, just something where you need to log in, right? Because you are thinking of your password as you type it in, if you have the permissions on for your brain-computer interface, whether or not you're manually typing it in, thinking that it's turned off, or you just use the interface itself and you think the password, that has been recorded and stored in that system. And if that system happens to be hacked by some other entity, that's going to compromise not only your passwords for all of those systems, but it's going to compromise any password you may have put in any system at any point while using the brain-computer interface. This is also freaky because it goes to a sort of like Black Mirror level of what the fuck. It might come to the point in the near future where you can record what someone is seeing. You can sort of see out their eyes. And there's a lot of information out there that hypothesizes how this is potentially possible. Now, if you could compromise somebody's visual cortex, that would completely change the nature of what blackmail is. It's not just something where maybe you take a scandalous picture and send it to your boo. It's going to compromise business, personal life, your family, all kinds of things. But in general, these are things to think about in terms of how security will be compromised and need a new level of encryption and security envisioned for this data that's more sensitive on a whole new level as well. So now that we've covered a little bit of the new necessities regarding security and encryption, let's jump into education. So I personally think that this should be one of the major backbones to the pushback as this stuff becomes available to consumers. I feel like the only way for us to avoid that Black Mirror society that we really don't want to see is for everyday people to start to have a little bit more of an understanding of not only neurocognitive sciences, but the nature of brain waves, what that data means, what kinds of data are picked up by sensors in particular. About 2 years ago, I attended a Samsung wearable technology meetup in San Francisco. It was a fairly interesting get-together. And one of the things that stuck with me was the potential uses, but also drawbacks to wearing a smart device that can monitor your resting heart rate. Now, for some people who have medical problems, it's a godsend. It can really, foresee a medical emergency ahead of time, whether that's, you have a heart murmur or you have congestive heart failure or something like that. It could be really valuable for someone. But at the same time, that data has a lot of hidden information in it that the average everyday person isn't aware of. One of the things I learned that I found interesting but also really disturbing was that you can actually plot out a woman's menstrual cycle and her fertility rates based on her resting heart rate. You can determine the fluctuations of her hormones based on the resting heart rate alone. Freaky stuff, right? Now, how do you feel about Samsung or any other kind of corporation having access to that data, especially when you didn't ask them to run that algorithm on it and know when your period is going to be, I mean, when it's my period app, I consented for that, and that's something that I want it to do. But if it's just arbitrarily collecting that data and running those algorithms on it without my consent and using that data to potentially, manipulate my state of mind or my emotional state, that's weird. What if it just starts advertising chocolate to me right before my period? Creepy. I might want chocolate, but fuck you. Don't advertise me chocolate before my period. It's my personal business when I'm going to be on the rag. Now, that's a stupid example, okay? And it's meant to be funny, but it's also meant to draw your attention to the ways that can be used to manipulate you. We're biological beings. And so if you have, this machine learning being applied to your biometric data, there's a lot of power that can be leveraged against a person in that way that the average consumer might not be aware of. So the final thing I want to touch on today is who owns this data? Is it still your data? Is it your stream of consciousness? If when you start using this technology, does the right to it automatically turn over to the company that created the proprietary software and hardware that is processing that data? Does it belong to the firm that they sell it to? These are all really important questions that I think fall back into the realm of education for consumers. So before these technologies become an everyday, convenient way for us to work smarter, faster, harder, and more inspired, we need to really step up and be capable of being responsible with those newfound brain-computer interface powers, right? In order to properly utilize it, we're going to need to understand the level of neurocognitive science that's involved so we can know what we're consenting to, so we can know what types of data the sensors are picking up, what kind of sensors they are, what kinds of algorithms can extrapolate what kinds of information from the raw data. I think an interesting entry point for understanding this is going to be the very first fledgling technologies in this way. So that might be Next VR, which I'll go ahead and cover in a subsequent episode, or it might be something like the Muse headband, which is a meditation aid headband that monitors your brainwaves and gives you neural feedback in real time about your ability to get into a mindfulness meditation space. These are really useful tools because they are sort of the baby steps for people to understand not only how the technology works, what kinds of data are being pulled in, how it's being processed, but also how your mind is going to connect and manipulate the tools within this space. So that's going to be something I cover in future episodes. I figure if nobody else is going to do the cognitive neuroscience education around brain-computer interfaces, I want that to be a fundamental part of Dreamseed going into the future. Because if nobody else is going to do it, like we have to figure it out together. And I wouldn't want us to go blindly into this new Black Mirror future without some semblance of a game plan, even if it's just us, you guys, like this tiny little channel of 400 people. We're in a really unique place in human history. And if you 400 people see this episode and future episodes that break down the entry point for how this technology works, you can share that with your friends and loved ones. You can share that with people who might be a little bit more like on the passive side of everyday consumers, you know, who just like, oh, it's the newest gadget, I'm going to go get it, as opposed to understanding what they're getting into. So thanks for checking out this part 2. I'm really glad that you've made it this far. I feel really passionate about this particular thread that we've started to pull. And I think that there's a lot of really interesting stuff to go into in the future. So be sure to stay tuned for any of the future brain-computer interface series episodes. And if you enjoy, please let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe and share it with your other nerdy friends who love the future. And you can support the channel on patreon.com/SarahFinn. And you can find me on social media and interact with me at Dreamseed_VR on Instagram and Twitter. So in the meantime, enjoy the developments of the future, and I'll catch up with you next time. Bye.